we are essentially subordinating ourselves to Israeli command and control. We will attack when the Israelis say they think they're comfortable, and we will continue to do whatever we're going to do during the attack until the Israelis ask us to stop. And that is effectively what happened during the 12-day conflict. It was the Israelis that contacted us and said, essentially, enough. And that was because they were sustaining a lot of damage that I don't think they really expected. Now, are we going to attack Iran? Yes, I would say the probability of that occurring is maybe 99%. So I think that's an absolute certainty. I wish that it were not. I think wars that can be avoided should be avoided. Whatever you plan, however careful you may be, whatever amounts of military power that you amass, once war begins, everything tends to change. Forces out of your control overwhelm you. Unanticipated consequences of your actions have an effect. Now, you mentioned Russia and Iran. I don't have the exact tally in front of me, but if you look at Russian and China, if you look at Russian and Chinese investment in Iran, it's substantial. Runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, this is not something that they're interested in tossing away. It's also interesting to note that in previous years, both Moscow and Beijing have offered the Iranians assistance with integrated air defenses. And on these previous occasions, and I mean until the last 6, 7, 8 months, the Iranians said, no thanks, we'll do it ourselves. Well, that did not work terribly well the last time. The integrated air defense didn't perform, not to the extent that they'd hoped. So this is a different situation now. The problem for the Iranians, and these are intelligent people, anyone who thinks that the Iranians do not have a lot of human capital and clever and intelligent people is wrong. They do, and they're very expert at cyber, and their engineers are held in extremely high regard when you look at the quality of rocketry and missile engineering. So they're very effective. The issue that we cannot really address because you and I don't know it is how well integrated all of this new technology and advice is. I mean, it's one thing to integrate advice and support and new technologies over the space of, say, 2, 3, 4 years. But they've had to do a lot of work since the last event. A lot of people didn't notice, but when the Iranian president visited President Putin after the last conflict that lasted 12 days, Putin said very quietly to him, and it was barely picked up, and I don't see anybody in the West who's talked about it, but he said to him very quietly, you should have let us help you. In the meantime, it's very obvious that we are assembling practically every F-35, F-22, and F-15 Strike Eagle that we can possibly get, and along with the F-18s and the F-35 variant for the Navy, with the hope of having well over 100 aircraft, probably 150 to 200, plus all the refueling assets. Now, we haven't even discussed all the anti-missile missiles. In other words, our air defense missiles aboard all these Aegis-class destroyers. All of that is assembled, with the exception of the Ford Battle Group right now. The Ford Battle Group sailed through the Straits of Gibraltar a few hours ago. That would put them off the coast of Israel by Sunday, which would mean that you would have everything in place and conceivably everybody ready to go by Tuesday or Monday, the 23rd or the 24th. So that's when I would look for something to happen at this stage. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen earlier, but the United States is very methodical in the way it does business, particularly with air and naval power. And until they're satisfied everything is there, I don't think much will happen. Then the question is, how much damage does Iran sustain, frankly, before the Russians and the Chinese feel compelled to intervene directly? See, they've already intervened with support. That's substantial. Nobody questions that. They have a lot invested in Iran. What we don't know is what's the limit of their tolerance. In other words, how much damage will they tolerate against Iran before they step in and tell us either you stop or we fight too? I don't know. We can mobilize enough explosives, enough missiles, enough aircraft to essentially reduce most of Iran to rubble. Does that achieve your objective? Does that mean that Iran suddenly stands up and says, we're sorry, We'll now subordinate ourselves to Israel's demands. We recognize Israeli hegemony in the region. We'll behave nicely from here on out, and we will never ever again threaten Israel. I don't think so. I think that's very unlikely. So then the question is, what do the Russians say if the entire nation is leveled? I don't think they'll wait that long. Now, there's another possibility, and that is that we are so surprised by the Iranians and the capabilities they have at their disposal. These long-range ship missiles that are just built by the Chinese that are being provided to the Iranians, they could conceivably hit ships and damage them. People always talk about, sink a carrier. You don't need to sink anything. All you need to do is put it out of action. You put enough holes in the deck, in fact, one large hole in the deck of a carrier, the carrier is useless. There's not much you can do with it. So I think what we have to consider is the possibility that that could happen. We know they can strike all of our bases in the region with great effect. We actually have a lot of aircraft operating out of Jordan. That to me is very dangerous. Jordan is not that far. They say it's out of range. We'll see. In other words, we don't know what they can do as much as we would like to. We think they can do only so many things, and we're planning on that. But we could be surprised. And if we take losses and large numbers of Americans are killed, we don't know what the effect will be in the United States. Everybody assumes that people will stand up and cheer, well, let's go after those people and destroy them all. Well, maybe, but I think there's also a higher probability of people asking, what are we doing this for? Why did we begin this? Who thought this up? We don't know what Americans will think or do because Americans as a people really haven't been engaged. I know this is a shock, but most Americans don't really pay much attention to what happens beyond the borders of the country. They're struggling with things here at home that they think are more important. They don't understand why the current president is not focused on what's happening here. They want to know why he's walking away from Minnesota. He was elected to a large extent because people want him to deal decisively with illegal immigration. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, what are you stopping here for? That's more important to us than anything happening in the Middle East. What about the economy? You say inflation is down, everything's coming up roses. That's not the feeling across the country. 53% of people polled in the United States say our economy is very poor. Only about 32 or 34% say, oh, it's great. He's got midterms coming up at the end of this year. What's it going to be like for him? Right now, his polling is terrible. Is he going to improve his position by waging war in the Middle East?